hereby call this meeting of Norwood City Council to order. Please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. This evening, our invocation will be led by Rabbi Jennifer Lewis, Interfaith Program Director and Jewish Chaplain, Xavier University.
I feel blessed and honored to welcome and sanctify this moment. Holy One of blessing, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today as we prepare to begin the Norwood City Council meeting this evening. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you for your boundless and gracious nature. In Jewish liturgy last week, we read from our holy scriptures the story of Jacob's return to his home community and his reunion with his brother Esav. As Jacob approached the moment of reuniting with his brother, he wrestled with a messenger of God and his conscience, discerning how to best approach his twin brother. We know that important relationships take work. We wrestle with balancing our responsibilities, our heart, and our moral compass. Like Jacob, let us pray for wisdom. Gracious God, just as you helped those who came before us discern, please grant wisdom to this governing body, Norwood City Council, in the agenda set before them today. Grant them wisdom to govern amid conflicting interests and issues, a sense of the welfare and true needs of the people of Norwood, a keen thirst for justice and fairness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. May the one who makes peace in high places help us create a community of good work on earth, and let us say, Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce.
Here.
Mr. Kelsch. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Braden. Here.
We have 6 members present, 1 member absent. Moving on to item E, amendment of the agenda. We have 2 items this evening to add to the agenda. The first is an ordinance consisting to project ID number 105478 and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Director of Transportation for the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project and declaring an emergency. That will be item M3. And then we have a letter this evening from our treasurer, Mr. James Bonsall, that will be under communications number 2. And that's all I have to add to the agenda. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mr. Braden to amend the agenda. Mrs. Hoover.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item F, minutes of previous meeting, November 22nd, 2022, regular meeting. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I move we accept the minutes as read.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to accept the minutes as read. Ms. Royce?
Second.
Second by Ms. Royce. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item G, special presentations. This evening, we have the Norwood Park Survey by Mrs. Emily Franzen, Council at Large. Mrs. Franzen.
All right.
Hello, everyone. So it's going to be a little awkward. We didn't quite get the big screen attached here, so I'm going to try to do my best to paint you a word with pictures. Beautiful pictures that you can kind of see on there, and I'll ask for Mr. Miracle's help in advancing the slides. So for the first one, so this is a continuation of work done with, through ASAP Norwood. There we go. Yeah, you can't really see it too well, but I will be just saying what's on these slides, and I will be posting this on the website through Civic Clerk, all that stuff. Has some nice graphs. I'm also going to upload the full rundown of every single individual response, of which there are 174, so you can take a look at everything that was submitted to me. So, starting again. So, back in 2020, ASAP Norwood sponsored a park audit of all of our city parks. This involved volunteers going out to the parks and just seeing what was there, what condition it was in, what was lacking, and giving recommendations on what they felt the parks needed and what were some easy fixes. So these basic needs were identified, and then there was a course of action proposed where we would be making a master plan, which is something a lot of cities have done in the present climate, as well as some suggestions for some more immediate fixes. So, as a result of that, there's been repairs to shelters, more grills added, for instance, more benches, repainting of bathrooms, etc. Really big refresh of Hunter Park in 2021 and 2022. There's now security cameras at all the parks, which is very nice. Removal of old equipment is ongoing, and there are some really significant baseball field improvements, new dugouts, lovely new dirt. So a lot of really good things have happened, but there's still a lot of ways to go. And part of what we need to do for master plan is first see what people actually want to see. We can't just make assumptions that, oh, there's a playground here, so there should just be another slightly different playground here. Maybe people want something different. So as a part of that, I did a survey via SurveyMonkey, which is an online company that does a lot of these surveys. I only asked 10 questions, focused on finding out which parks people most used and what they most want to see in our parks. So I posted this on Facebook, the city website, and I put a poster with a QR code at every single park in the city, and I transmitted it via other means to the schools and through Xavier. I included common ideas for park improvements, as well as space for comments on what people wanted to see. Very important, I did not use any city money for this. It's only my money, so there was no consultant. It was just me. Yeah. And through September to early December, there were 174 respondents. So I thought that was pretty decent. Always would love more, but that is what we got. So I'm going to go through some of the results. And again, there are some lovely bar graphs. They're very beautiful, but I will tell you what the bar graphs say. So the first question was just asking if you or any member of your household has used any of the City of Norwood's parks or facilities in the last 12 months. So most people, over 50%, had gone to Millcrest, Waterworks, Victory Park, and Lindner Park. Burwood and Doral Field were also very popular. And then Fenwick, Hunter, Northwoods, and Water Tower were hovering right around 10 to 20% of respondents having used that in the last year. Only one person said none of the above. I guess they just wanted to take a survey. That's nice. So question 2, of all of our parks, I wanted to see which 3 that they felt needed the most improvements. So because Hunter Park had that really recent refresh, I was very pleased to see that very few people thought it needed improvement, since we kind of just worked to improve it. Very heartening to see that. But there were 3 pretty clear standouts to me. One was Burwood, Millcrest Park, and Victory Park. These are also the parks that were used quite a bit by people. So even though people are using them, they still think, there could be some improvements here. There's stuff that could be there to make it even better. Some of the ones that were less thought of as needing improvement included stuff like Northwoods, Lindner Park's always very nice. Water Tower Park was kind of a little in the middle there, but it has the issue of kind of being a park that no one really knows too much about. I know for me, when I first started looking into the parks, it was the one I had not visited at all, and I had to be like, oh, there is a park here. It's not just a water tower. Oh, that's nice. So the next question was, which park you visited the most over the last 12 months? And similar kind of things as with the first question. Burwood Park, Millcrest Park, Victory Park, and Northwoods Park were the most visited of the parks for all the people that did this survey. So that's great. They're used a lot. People do like going to them, but these three parks, this Burwood, Victory, and Millcrest, it seems like there's still some stuff that's lacking. So all of these are just main takeaways. They're all visited. Lindner, Millcrest, Waterworks, Victory, Burwood were visited by about 40% of respondents, and Burwood, Millcrest, and Victory seemed like they were most in need of improvements. Then, this is not a very helpful bar graph with it being so small, but I will assure you there are some very interesting results here. Namely, I wanted to see which of the 4 amenities or facilities that we already have in the parks are the most important to these folks. And the results were unsurprising in some ways. Playgrounds. Everyone loves playgrounds. Kids like to go play on playgrounds. Families like to have their kids go off to the playground so they can, rest for a little bit. Walking paths and nature trails, always nice for those with kids or with dogs like myself. The really big one, though, was bathroom access. So people really want more and better bathroom access in the parks, which makes sense, especially when you have small kids. They always have to go to the bathroom, even though you told them that you had to go to the bathroom before you left. So, it makes sense. Other things that people really liked having would be water or bottle filling stations. Kind of goes hand in hand with bathrooms, having working plumbing. You got running water, it's potable, that's what you need. And then picnic tables and benches, and of course, a lot of people enjoy using Waterworks pool. Then this next one is about what you would most like to see. So this is something I used input from other folks to kind of see like what they've been wanting to see in parks, along with information from other surveys that other cities had given. I wanted to just make a list of kind of the most common improvements that people have said they wanted to see. Natural playscapes, different playgrounds, splash pad is a big one. So for most people, the number one choice was just more walking and hiking trails. Natural playscapes or larger or different playgrounds, also really high up there. Shade trees and landscaping, also really wanted, and splash pad. So I had 2 kind of separate categories. One would be a splash pad at Waterworks, where there's already a pool. The other one was a splash pad at a different park, because I had heard kind of different things, so like, oh, it'd be nice to have one at Waterworks. Oh, I'd rather have it somewhere else, so it wasn't just going to the same place. Put them both on there, and together, 65% of respondents really wanted to have a splash pad somewhere. So, interesting stuff, I thought. The takeaways I have are the most important are playgrounds and bathrooms, second most important, hiking and walking trails. And then in general, the biggest ones, the more different forms of playgrounds, splash pad, and trails. So big issue with the second and third, space and money. There's a lovely walking path around Hunter Park, but it's relatively small. Similar issues with Northwoods and Marsh. These are relatively small parks, not really so much in the way of hiking as opposed to just kind of meandering around for a couple minutes. Not bad, but not as exciting as Lindner, where there's a lot of really nice nature trails. So Millcrest would be a really good potential spot for hiking and nature trails in the future. I'll talk about why that might be a little more pricey, something to think about for the future later. Also, the interest in shade trees and landscaping, that's just something that's going to take some time too. We are planting trees. Folks like Keep Norwood Cool have planted a lot of trees recently, but it just takes time for them to grow, unfortunately. So we can keep working on that, keep trying to make sure we are replacing trees as they age out and have to be taken down. So I think that's good, shows that people do want to see that. All right, so big thing is splash pad. It's a really big one, but it's a lot of money. And researching it, it's easily in the 6 figures, 7 figures to get a really good splash pad, not just like a little fountain that you can kind of dip your feet into. This is not impossible. I don't want to say that, no, we can't do this, but we would need some definite outside funding for this. So I don't want to say like, yeah, people want a splash pad, so we're definitely going to do that, because I can't promise that. But I am hearing everyone who wants a splash pad. I want to acknowledge that, and I really, really want to find some money for that if we can. All right. Another question I asked was just, what are your barriers for using the parks? Number one was safety. Either safety as far as not feeling safe in the parks with people feeling like there's drug usage going on, people feeling like there's homeless people that are being there and making them feel unsafe, or just feeling that the equipment itself seems run down, not as well taken care of as they might like. So I kind of put some representative comments on there. I won't read through them because I don't want to take up the entirety of this council meeting with this presentation. The second issue was outdated or aging equipment, which kind of goes hand in hand in safety. People, there were some places that they like to go, but there really wasn't that much compared to some other parks in the area that they could easily drive to. There's really no programming in a lot of the parks, with the exception of the rec, of course. And it's just not exciting for a lot of people. All right, third one is just those other and larger parks nearby. Stuff like Alt Park, French Park, Washington Park, Summit Park, all these really huge tracts of land that are only 10, 15 minutes away. So a lot of people like to go there because the bigger the park, the more kids there are. The more kids there are, the more entertained your child can be, and the more that you can check your Facebook or do something else besides watching your kids. So something that a lot of people talked about. This is just demographic information. In general, the majority of the respondents were in between 25 and 64 years of age, a couple seniors in there, and some teenagers did take the survey as well. And a nice 61% of folks had a child under the age of 12 in their household, which is people who tend to really pay attention to parks and playground access closer to home. It's a lot harder to transport kids, a lot easier to just be able to walk somewhere and have something fun to do. All right, limitations to the survey. I'm not a consultant. I am a simple councilwoman, and I have other things in my life, unfortunately. So my outreach was more limited than I wanted it to be. This is not as accessible to people without computers or smartphones, and that is a demographic that I would like to reach. Focus mainly on the needs of folks with young kids, so not a lot of teenage input. And honestly, there's always more room to get ideas. The survey's still open. I didn't close it. So if you're watching this and be like, survey, what survey? I didn't know about that. Well, congratulations. You still have time. Go take it now. It takes like 5 minutes, I promise. All right, so I talked to Darren and Clint Zimmerman, the Public Works Director, and the other city administration folks, and talked about what I thought some recommendations would be, and they said what they thought was feasible. So here are some of my personal recommendations. This is not saying that we definitely are going to do this, but I think this is reasonable things that we can look forward to in the next 2 years, let's say. Number one, Victory Park, removing that old playground equipment and replacing it with something of a similar size. That playground equipment has some rusty spots, it's kind of old-fashioned, and the kids do like to play on it, but when we're having events there, it'd be nice to have something even nicer. And speaking of the events, it's really nice that we're drawing people into Victory Park, people are using it, but once the events aren't there, there's still not that much to do. Without the pool there, there's not the big a draw, and the playground, as I stated, is not the highest or the newest playground in the city. So something that we could do would be just replacing that. The bathroom access is going to be an issue. I talked to Mr. Zimmerman about that. The major issue is vandalism, public urination and defecation, trying to make this accessible for people who are using the park without having people vandalize the building. This is a struggle for not just this bathroom, but all bathrooms in Norwood and in Cincinnati is the thing. So it's just something that we'll have to continue to work out and figure out as a city. Something that would be really nice would be landscaping upgrades, just making it look nicer. Part of that would be having a sprinkler system. That's something that Mr. Zimmerman really would like, so we can have better landscaping there. It's not really feasible to have a water truck come, and we can have really, really nice stuff, but if we can't water it, then it's just going to, wilt and decay, and that's not going to be nice. So having a sprinkler system would be really, really cool. And just having some sort of draw outside of events, like I said. That could be a playground, that could be something else. Second one, Burwood. Burwood, I think, is another low-hanging fruit. Just removing the old playground equipment, that's already something that's in progress. Mr. Zimmerman is working on getting that done. Adding some fencing to just enclose that west side of the park. People already bring their dogs down there. It'd be nice to have an area where they can let their dogs run loose or have their kids be running around unsupervised. This could also be a great opportunity for like a natural playscape or natural landscaping. That naturescape is something that a lot of people were interested in. It's a relatively cheap way. I'll show some pictures of what that actually looks like. It'd be a really nice area to have it because there's already all those trees there. Feels very natural already. And also with this, the bathroom plumbing issues, it's something the city already knows about. It's just something that needs to be addressed since bathroom access is a really big deal for people. This is just two examples of what a naturescape looks like. Again, not the most useful pictures right now, but it doesn't have to be super fancy. The picture on the right is a little more fancy schmancy, like, artificial turf maybe, or more structured stuff. But honestly, it could just be a bunch of logs, like structured play area. I was an outdoors girl, as will not surprise anyone. I played in the woods quite a bit. A lot of folks in the city don't have access to the woods or woods that are safe. It could be an area where you could just have a bunch of logs, make forts, run around. There's a lovely natural playscape over by New City Presbyterian Church on Floral. Kids really love running around in that after school. That would be something we could do in Burwood pretty easily. And that's something that we're trying to look into in the new year, hopefully. All right, last one, Upper and Lower Millcrest. This is going to be more of a long-term project. Another place that we could do that natural playscape. We could make a trail around the perimeter of the park. That's going to take money and time and someone who actually knows what they're doing, which is not me, some outside company. So again, money would have to do that. People have complained a bit about the surface around the existing playgrounds with wood chips not being the best, but they're also not super expensive. So the issue is a lot of these like rubberized chips and stuff are 3 to 4 times more expensive than wood chips. And because of our continuing financial issues, it's just either that or not much of anything else. So for right now, we're going to keep using what we can with these wood chips. The hope is to repave the parking area, which will help improve accessibility. Right now, that parking area is not ideal, having parked there quite a bit. Updating the playgrounds that currently exist would be great. And there is need for a basketball hoop at Upper Millcrest. That's something that residents have reached out to me about, and so I am working on that specifically. All right, last slide, and hopefully I haven't gone too far overboard. I just need to figure out what the park's budget in 2023 looks like, meet with my ad hoc committee in the new year to talk more about this survey, pursue some outside funding sources, figure out how much it's going to cost, figure out the timing, and work with the city administration and my fellow council people to figure out what works best. So with that, it's my acknowledgements. I'm, again, sorry the presentation was not quite as pretty as I might have liked, but hopefully that was entertaining enough. No one fell asleep. That's always great. I don't know, as far as questions, if I can take some right now, I'd love to, or if you'd just like to talk to me later on, I'm going to talk through this again in the Parks Committee meeting, but I wanted to do that after the holidays because I know a lot of folks that are interested in this are pretty busy this time of year, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Franklin.
I'm gonna, any questions? Sorry. I hope I didn't go too long. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item I, request to address council. We have one request to address council this evening. It's Bishop Sonny James.
Good evening. I am so excited to be able to stand before you today On yesterday evening, I attended the very first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board meeting, and I got stuck in the elevator at the conclusion of the thing, and I have some young men with disabilities, so that made it very exciting and interesting. But as usual, our Norwood Fire Department, yes, way to go. So I want to first acknowledge that I do recognize all of you who have been very supportive to my family as we have endured a house fire, and we are processing our way through that. So thank you for your love and your prayers. I want to also acknowledge that at the conclusion of 2022, I have to acknowledge that as I look around Norwood and talk to my peers who have oftentimes disagreed with how Norwood presents itself, I'm very pleased to say that I've really been standing up. And I'm also excited that my dear colleague and peer is here because we are, Rabbi Jennifer Lewis and some of our peers at Xavier, we've been doing Black History Month celebrations now, and we are continuing. And so we want to extend a hearty welcome to everybody out there, young, not so young. Doesn't matter what your nationality is. We're one community, and we want to act like it. Then we're also doing a celebration for Dr. Martin Luther King. Many of you know that we've done that now, and we will continue to do so. So if there's anything that the administration would want of us, please have someone contact me. You all know how to reach me, and if you don't, it is area code 513-487-8843, or email me at pastorsonnyjames@gmail.com. We want everybody to participate. I've intentionally not allowed outsiders to come because, as you've seen across the city of Cincinnati, when people are not happy with certain things, they come and then you can't control the emotional outburst. So we have intentionally limited some of our participation to cut down on that. However, this year, I want to make sure that everybody knows they are more than welcome. And that starts with you all. You're more than welcome. I also want to invite the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board. This is something that you should really get your teeth into. I definitely have some different opinions about some things. But one of the things that I want our city to finally embrace is it's nice to do a good deed and bring people together. But as you address diversity, just look at our own city. It's nice to go outside. And I want to say and compliment Susan Hoover because she went out and got Ivy Banks with Xavier to come, and that sister did a bang-up, phenomenal presentation on yesterday evening. The only thing that we missed was those that actually have experience. When you talk about diversity, it's a very sensitive issue. If you don't believe me, turn on your TV all around the country. And people have a way of wanting to know that they're heard. And one of the things that she expressed is part of inclusion is accessibility. And that means giving everybody an opportunity to be at the table. And so as I plan to support the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board, and I do, but as I talk to 15 of my peers that do this kind of work for their life, all 15 of them would say, there's only one thing I'm missing. What are we focusing on for the advancement of people of color? And so I want to challenge the advisory board to make that a priority. But here's the deal. At the meeting last night, I heard about grants, and going after money is great. I heard about surveys, and getting surveys are great. But I want to support you all in what you do, But I want you to support me also as we actually try to address the issues that are right here in our face that really address and affect people even to this day. Accessibility is one of them,
Thank you, Bishop James.
okay? God bless you all. Have a happy, happy holiday season, and let's continue to work together, or start working together. God bless you.
And that concludes
Thank you,
our...
Director.
That concludes our request to address council. We move on to item M1, introductory reading of ordinance and resolutions. M1, ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Would move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Mr. Braden. Second. Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Mr. Thompson.
A second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item M2, ordinance amending the personnel policy and procedure manual of the city of Norwood, Ohio. Mr. Thompson.
Move that we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, this is a very small wording change in our policy and procedures manual that brings our sick leave policy kind of in line with other municipalities in the area, as well as the state of Ohio. Basically allows you to bring your credit for sick leave for prior public service over. It travels with you when you change jobs between cities. So this will put us in line with everybody else in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, motion passes.
Ordinance amending the Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual of the City of Norwood, Ohio. Ordinance amending the Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual of the City of Norwood, Ohio. Ordinance amending the Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual of the City of Norwood, Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Motion to pass the ordinance?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Ms. Roy.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Royce. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item M3, ordinance consenting to the project ID number 105478 and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Director of Transportation for the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to have all 3 readings and declare an emergency.
Motion by Mr. Brady to suspend rules and have all 3 readings. May I have a second? Mrs. Hoover?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance consenting to the project ID number 105478 and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Director of Transportation for the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project and declaring an emergency. Ordinance consenting to the project ID number 105478 and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Director of Transportation for the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project and declaring an emergency. Ordinance consenting to the project ID number 105478 and authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Director of Transportation for the State of Ohio necessary to complete the project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Motion to pass the ordinance?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the ordinance. Ms. Royce.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Royce. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item N, administrative reports. This evening, we have our treasurer, Mr. James Bonzel. Welcome.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the time to be here. Just want to provide kind of just a quick update about what's happening in the treasurer's office. We will have a more comprehensive update, hoping that potentially we can have a finance committee meeting in January, maybe late January when the auditor's report's out, the treasurer's report's out. We'll have a more comprehensive update for you on kind of where the city's outlook is. But our tax commissioner, Tim Wagers, he's here in the audience. So he started in that role in May, and he has been doing an incredible job. We've been extremely busy when it comes to hiring processes. We've been evaluating our banking fees that we currently pay to try to reduce. Tim's found quite a bit of unnecessary expenses that we were able to take off, just things that weren't thought about that we didn't necessarily need. So we've been working on that, and as well as talking to other banks as well to see can we actually even save quite a bit more money by potentially switching banks. So all that's being done while they're still doing all of the necessary tasks that have to be done in the treasurer's office, whether it's working with the auditor's office to close out the end of month, whether it's the bank reconciliations that we're working on, and just processing the thousands of tax returns that we get in that have to be audited. So it's all happening. The tax returns, you'll still be getting letters for this tax year, so we're working through those. We've got a great plan to get done so that we can we'll be focusing on tax year 2022 returns. But you'll still be getting some letters from there as we close out the year. So I just wanted to let you all know, and like I said, you've got the report that I just sent you all with the financial outlook. I'll be sending these monthly from here on out so that you kind of know where we are from an earnings tax perspective. If you all had any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Bonzel.
good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Moving on to item O, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening? Mrs. Hoover.
Thank you. I have a couple quick things. One, I just wanted to give a quick little update. We did have our second Xavier student coffee break on Sunday. It was a little chilly. We did this in the spring. It was an effort, it came out of the Housing, Health, and Public Safety Committee to continue to improve our relationships with our Xavier student neighbors. In the spring, we had over 100 neighbors and student neighbors. This year, or this weekend, we had about 40. So we're going to continue to look at it. That was still a very positive experience. Had some great conversations, was just very informal, chatted with the kids as they were preparing for their exams. Just really lovely event. I did want to thank Red 5 Coffee, donated their time. Kroger donated, Cappy's let us use their parking lot. So it was a real community kind of event. So that was really lovely. The second thing was Bishop James mentioned that we did have our first DEI Advisory Board meeting last night. It was really, really lovely. We have a lot of big things we're going to be doing. Unfortunately, I did receive a letter from Mr. Kelch. He is going to be resigning from his position, and I can read his letter. Wrote a lovely letter. Mrs. Hoover, please accept my resignation from my position as a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Board. Though I highly support this initiative, my schedule has changed, and I will not have the extra time that I had initially planned to dedicate to this group. I do not wish to halt or hinder progress, so I must step aside for now. I look forward to assisting you in the efforts of the DEI Board in other ways as a member of council as we move forward. Respectfully, Chris Kelch. So I want to thank him very much for that. And in his absence, I have asked Alexis Royce if she would be willing to step into that position, and I would ask that the council vote her into that position with the open. So I guess I'm making a motion
Would you like
to,
You want to make a motion to?
I'd like to make a
Ms. Royce?
motion that we would vote Alexis Royce into that would be the one-year position for city council spot on the DEI advisory board.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Thank you. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Thank you, Ms. Royce.
That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other unfinished business? Mrs. Winterbauer?
Just a follow-up, we have an Economic Development Committee meeting this Thursday at 6:30. The NKU students are going to be presenting their economic strategic plan. They had done a residential survey, also a business survey, so they're bringing all that data. I've seen a little bit of it, I'm really excited. And I always say students, but these students are employees and other administrations. We have a police chief, so we have a lot of input from other areas, and they're working on their masters in this, so I'm not saying anything against freshmen and seniors, but, these are individuals who are very active in the cities that they live in on all levels, so they have a lot of great things to bring to the table, so I'm excited for that. So please come, log in, check it out, we'll have some good stuff.
Thank you, Mrs. Winterbauer. Anyone else? We'll move on to new business. Any new business this evening? Mrs. Hoover?
Just one, sir, thank you. The MLK Day of Service, which we did last year, we'll be doing it again this year. That will be on January the 16th. We're also going to be adding a blood drive this year, which I'm super excited about. We'll be doing it in the a blood drive van outside of the health department, so there'll be, we'll keep an eye out for more information about that. For our day of service, last year it was sort of more in the time of COVID. We had 4 different sites. I'm hoping to have more locations where people can volunteer this year. But last year we were at Baby Bear, Zion, Norwood Together, and I did it again, forgetting the 4th. I always forget the 4th. So if anyone in the community knows of a Norwood nonprofit that would be interested in hosting volunteers, please reach out to me, shoover@norwoodohio.gov. I would love to reach out to them. I'll be reaching out to other agencies in the next few days. But that will be on January the 16th, and then keep your eyes open for how to sign up for the blood drive that same day as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further new business? We'll move on to communications. We have 2 communications this evening. The first is Mayor Victor Schneider regarding the mayor's court fines.
Dear Mr. President and council members, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of November 2022. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Ms. Winterbauer?
Any second?
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item 2 is the report from, letter from Mr. Bonzel, Treasurer.
Dear Norwood City Council, attached is the latest earnings tax report. For November, you will see a 73% increase from last year's receipts. This increase was due to a significantly higher than expected net profit receipt from a company with operations in Norwood. It's not expected for this to continue annually. If we took out that one-time unexpected payment, the city is currently 5.5% down year-to-date from 2021 receipts, which is better than the 7.1% decrease my office projected for the financial recovery plan. The reduction from the withholding portion of the earnings tax is from work-from-home changes within our current business climate. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Tax Commissioner Tim Wagers. Sincerely, James Gonzal, Treasurer, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mrs. Hoover.
Make a motion that we receive the letter as read.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover, receive the letter as if read. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item R, excuse absent members. May I have a motion to excuse the absent member? Mrs. Franzen?
I make a motion to excuse the absent member.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen. May I have a second? Mrs. Winterbauer?
My second?
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. May I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Thompson?
Move we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to adjourn. Mrs. Winterbauer?
Second?
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. We're adjourned.